safer on the road, where the cars can see them, and where the surface is better than they do on the sidewalks, which is uneven, where they have to go down and up every time they get to a road crossing. If pedways were built, then it would need to comply with ADA standards and become a safe connectors for people in wheelchairs. Here's a couple of quick examples of some of the problems that do exist with the Class 2 on-street bike lanes. And you often get people parking in these bike lanes, leaving. Not only do you have to pull out of the road to get around the parked cars, but you have to worry about people in those cars opening a door, so you kind of have to get even further out. Systems of pedestrian and wheelchair and bicycle pathways are quite common around the world. In the long presentation, I have something like 20 slides from different cities in Europe and the States that illustrate this. I've just got about 4 here. This is a town in England where I lived for many years called Milton Keynes. It was developed as a new town to relieve overpopulation in London in about 1970. It was basically planned from scratch in an almost entirely agricultural prior to that area. And a major component of the plan in the city now population about 200,000. And everywhere across the world, because that was done in the planning stage, it was nowhere near as expensive, obviously, as retrofitting something. This is a problem that cities that retrofit these kind of things have to spend. They're very popular, and people really use them for commuting. I use them for commuting all the time when I live there. And they go through neighborhoods, as you see here, and they also go through a lot of parkland in the city. This is, I believe, Holbæk in Denmark. And Denmark and Holland are two countries that have very good facilities for alternative transport. This illustrates a headway parallel in the road and a very vivid marking system to make that intersection safe. I assume that the right-of-way goes with the road traffic, and the 4-foot sidewalks are really not wide enough for most people, and the 6-foot bike lanes are really not very well used. If that plan for new roads were to be used, there's a very good chance that it would actually cost less to build those roads, because the amount of width that's built to the engineering standards supporting cars and trucks would be 12 foot less. And the cost of building the foundation for the pedway would be a lot less than per unit width. This is the last shot. This is Stevens Lake. This is really a sort of an update thing, but it's not very new anymore. As I'm sure most of you already know, last November the city approved the purchase of Stevens property, including this beautiful lake. It's a very strategic location because it's close to downtown. It would provide a corridor for...
This plan is going to help bring more people downtown. If you've ever tried to ride a bike downtown, you realize it's a little bit, it's almost impossible. And in fact, what we do is we encourage people to come downtown, park their bike, and then walk around simply because it's so difficult. This plan, though, would give bicyclists a thoroughfare for downtown, as well as other folks as well, by doing some sort of Pednet through downtown, so people can either breeze on through downtown and get to their destination, or they can use that as an entryway into downtown. The other thing is with the construction of the park at the MKT trailhead and everything that's happening to hook the MKT through Providence and up to the trail, it's just opening up a wealth of opportunity for not just downtown, but for Columbia as a whole. I think that there's a lot of people that are very interested from the tourism standpoint about biking vacations and so forth. And this is just a wonderful way to pull people into town. There are any number of dinky little towns along the Katy Trail that really got helped and really got revitalized because they're on the trail. And I think that this is is a wonderful thing that's happening with the park. So that's basically it from our position, and we'll continue to work and support you guys.
By the way, Carrie is the newest member of the Columbia Bicycle Pedestrian Commission,
I am.
and we appreciate your early and enthusiastic support when you play the helping us get us together.
It's exciting. And thanks for letting me speak.
Great.
Take off and enjoy your beer.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, with our concept of safe, pleasant places for people to be physically active, for families to walk, to ride their bicycles together. It's a wonderful concept to have the system of trails already in Columbia connected by ways of getting to other places on foot. And we really appreciate Pednet's advocacy role in encouraging the city council to look at that, to get this incorporated into the capital plan, the long-range transportation plan. That's a major step. I'm not sure how much you realize that, but that's not happening in any other places in Missouri right now, not in this way. So we really appreciate your system for getting those issues raised among the public and also around the decision makers as well. We're trying to get these kinds of coalitions started in other places in Missouri because, unfortunately, as our physical activity rates are 11 are overweight. Much of that because they're much more physically inactive. They don't ride their bicycles and walk to school the way many of us did when we were children. And so there's not safe places for children to be physically active. So this fits very well with that. We appreciate Pednet. And I know that you've been partnering with our advisory board to help other communities learn how to do these kinds of things. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming.
And I brought some materials, just some background information if anybody's interested, some a little bit of data, not too complicated, but it kind of helped kind of put things in perspective if you're interested.
And I just want to mention is that for the people that have come tonight and who are likely to volunteer and work to move the events with us, we're trying to give you first-hand exposure to the various interest groups that support this thing, so that when you are meeting the public, that you don't have to take our word for it, that you can hear from the people who pursue these interests themselves.
Especially in appreciate it.
People from Hartsburg tonight to be able to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're, several programs ongoing that we're trying to do, promote a fitness challenge, fitness awards every quarter, and every quarter we also have a forum on health and fitness, which we actually held here, the last one, May 2nd, I believe. And so that's pretty much what we do there. Our goal is to improve the physical fitness and health and quality of life of Columbia citizens, and I think that obviously fits into a nice trail network throughout the community as well. And Chip, when he spoke to me about this, he asked me to talk about walking and cycling and health and fitness benefits. And I guess as someone who's trained in the research model, I really believe that if you look at the literature and you look at any type of topics and concepts or, et cetera, that probably the most consistent research in the scientific literature is on the role of physical activity and health benefits. It's pretty much hard to find a negative article. There are some out there. Pretty much when you talk about certain particular health benefits like prevention of heart disease, prevention of diabetes, some cancers, prevention of high blood pressure, or the treatment and management of these conditions as well. Physical activity plays a very key and important role. So what I did was I teach a class in university, and it's on exercise testing and prescription, and we really focus on chronic diseases. So I just made a few handouts here of some scientific research, which I think might, if you're out there talking and you're trying to promote the concept of the Pednet and the Pedway, I think one of the reasons for having this is to reduce those obesity rates and try to prevent the obesity amongst our youth. 1 in 4 youth being overweight is really kind of impressive from my perspective. think this really is important. Now, most of this research is on adults, but this kind of gives you kind of a little overview of some of the scientific studies that are out there showing that physical activity is very beneficial in terms of reducing your risk of mortality and morbidity from chronic diseases. So I don't think I'll go into all of these. I can spend a few minutes trying to talk about the background on these. And if you just look at the last one, I think I'll summarize that a little bit. But we now know, that if you accumulate physical activity during the day, it doesn't have to be all done at one time, that pretty much you're going to gain some of these health benefits. And we also know that up to a certain point, the more you do, we can pretty much conclude that the more you do, the more benefits you receive. But some activity is better than none, and whether it's, there's a couple studies in here that are from Europe that show the benefits of, and also from Japan, cycling to work. There's one that they just looked at, if someone cycled 3 hours per week, they had about a 30% lower risk of mortality and morbidity over the following years. And that, I think, was from a Dutch study, actually. And then in Japan, they did a study where they looked at walking to work. And they found that those that walked 20 minutes or more 5 days per week to work and back, that they had about a 40% lower risk of developing hypertension or high blood pressure over the years. So I think they concluded that for every 26 people that walk to work would prevent one case of hypertension. And of course, that's the #1 cause of stroke, the #1 major risk factor for stroke. And then just the last page of this handout, these are 3 studies that are very recent that I'll just quickly summarize. One has to do with moderately overweight men and women who lost weight and exercised for a period of time. They lowered their blood pressure by 8/6 millimeters of mercury. And about every millimeter or 2 that you lower your blood pressure, you can reduce your risk of stroke by about 3 to 4%. So, these were people who had borderline high blood pressure. And the same thing was true for patients with chronic diseases in a managed care company in Minnesota who had chronic diseases. Those that exercised more than 60 minutes per week with chronic diseases, high blood pressure, heart disease, hypertension, etc., also had a 3-fold reduced risk of developing or having complications of those chronic diseases. And finally, this is a really powerful study, it was out of Finland. They took individuals who had a high risk for developing diabetes, and they randomized them to either get a just standard type of treatment or a very modest type of educational program to increase their physical activity level, to reduce their fat intake, and increase their fiber intake, and to have them lose weight. And if they lost 5 to 10 pounds and achieved these goals, they had a 58% lower risk of developing diabetes over 3 years. So I think these are, to me, I was at a meeting the other day for the researchers against inactivity-related diseases, and I think it was Dr. Booth was talking about on WebMD. This study was published or reported on there, and some physician commented that it's evidence like this that he really needs to try to convince his overweight, sedentary, high-risk people to begin an activity program. Now, the comment in the back was that only about 1 out of 20 physicians actually, or 1 out of 5 physicians actually counsel their patients about physical activity. Some of them improve, but it's really pretty powerful. And those that achieved all the goals, not a single one of them developed diabetes in 2 years. And of course, that's a major disease problem. With that, I hope this kind of would help you when you're out, if you do become part of this Pednet group. Sounds like a cool thing to do, Pednet, and as opposed to Deadhead. And maybe something you can throw in or something that talks about how the physical activity and the trail network could help us increase physical activity levels and hopefully reduce chronic disease. All right.
And segueing to now eating.
Well, let's make sure we...
Pednet. Our approach with the Center for Sustainable Living for the last decade or so has been to try to promote environmentally responsible and more fulfilling lifestyles. And a big part of that is finding a level of consumption of energy and resources that is commensurate with being able to sustain the way we live into the indefinite future. And I think as those of you who are going to be ped heads and going out and talking on behalf of Pednet to people in the community, might want to have some ideas and some background on things like energy and resource consumption, because we do have a situation where our society is living currently in a very unsustainable way in terms of the amount of energy and resources we consume. Some of you might already be aware that we consume about twice as much, a little over twice as much energy as the other advanced industrialized countries of Western Europe and Japan. And when you start comparing us with the newly industrializing countries, countries like China, we're consuming about 14 times as much energy per capita as they are. And then you start looking abroad to impoverished countries like Bangladesh, we're consuming over 100 times as much energy per person in this country as they do there. And of course, almost all of this energy, with a few minor exceptions, is non-renewable resources. It's primarily fossil fuels. And the impact of burning those fossil fuels, aside from the fact they're finite and they will eventually run out, is that we're polluting the air, we're polluting the water, and we're putting greenhouse gases out. Now, on a night like tonight, you might say we need more greenhouse gases.
Global warming.
But
No.
what we really have is global climate change. What the models say is not that the planet's just going to get warmer, but that our climate's going to get more erratic. So the fact that it's cold in late May doesn't dispute global warming or global climate change. It's just another example of erratic weather. But the general trend has been towards a great increase in heat on the planet overall over the last 150 or so years, and particularly within the last 2 decades.
That was an interesting talk we went to see there at the School of Natural Resources.
Right.
That fellow that's on the United Nations Global Warming Committee.
Right.
Evidence was pretty
The
dramatic.
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Yeah, it was
It's
dramatic.
definitely something there's a consensus within the scientific community. It's happening. There's some dispute about how quickly and what consequences to expect. But it's happening. And when you look at greenhouse gases, the U.S. being a little under 5% of the world's population is putting out more than a quarter of the greenhouse gases. And primarily that's CO2, and it's primarily from burning fossil fuels, and one of the biggest contributors is our transportation modalities. And, I'm not here to say nobody should be driving a car or anything like that. I own one and drive one too, but I think it's important when we get out and talk to folks to talk about the idea of non-motorized, muscle-powered transportation as a safe alternative and something that not only is healthy, as previous speakers have said, to the people who are doing it, but is also healthy to the global environment. And I think that's a real important aspect of this that would be good to emphasize in reaching out to people. Right now, Colombia has been growing very rapidly, not just in population, but it's been sprawling. And everybody's probably aware of this. I did bring some handouts from the Smart Growth Coalition, which PeaceWorks is also a member of, as well as a couple of newsletters I've got on there. One that focuses on global warming and one that's a general sustainable living guide. And I invite people to pick those up before I leave. Our sprawling isn't something that will be answered entirely by coming up with a Pednet system. What we really need to be doing to deal with sprawling is come up with a new pattern of development that's denser. If you start looking at Colombia, when you look about 50 years ago or 40 years ago, we had around 5,500 people per square mile, and now it's down to about 1,600 people per square mile in the city limits. We built things up in much less dense fashion than would be ideal. But given that we've got the development we've got now, for people who live as far away from where they work, where they go to school, where they want to recreate as they do, if they don't want to go by car, they're going to need to go by bicycle. Some people will be able to walk depending on where they are, but bicycle has got to become a much more major part of our transportation mix than it is now. And as Ian said earlier in the slideshow, the main reason why people choose not to bike who otherwise could, who are physically able and have a bike and enjoy bicycling, is safety. And it's just a real factor. I know, somebody gets out on a bike sometimes, myself, it's dangerous to be out on the road. And if you can get a Pednet system in place, you really can make a big difference in terms of increasing the level of biking. And look around the country, there are cities and towns, Columbia's size and larger, that are in climates more harsh than ours. Places like Ames, Iowa, or Madison, Wisconsin, where there's much higher rates of people using bicycles, and the reason for it is there's better bikeways. And it's really something we need to work for. Bicycling is the single most efficient way to get anywhere, and it's really time that we do more of it. In order to do that, we really need to have what Pednet is working toward. So I won't go on at any length. I could try to answer questions if people have them. I'm more prepared to present, but I think I hit on the key points. If anybody has questions.
There's one thing that you mentioned, and Chip and I talked about, and I wondered how this group felt about it. You talked about having a separate pedestrian network, a bicycle network that would encourage more people to ride. But what about the people that bicycle and say, you know, darn it, the roads are for all of us, and we should be able to ride on it just as much? I mean, how does that balance out, and how do we work that in, you know, to help to convince people that, okay, we agree that that should be an option for them if they choose it, but if that's our only option, then we're going to limit how many people ride bicycles.
Well, we sort of talked about this earlier.
I mean, maybe it's already been discussed, and I'm a little late. So.
It's definitely an issue, and it's something that we're working on right now. Chip has already prepared the first draft of a sort of a position statement that we're kind of developing, and we're very interested to know other people's views on this. There is a small group of hardcore cyclists that don't like the idea of separated pathways. I think that the number of people in that position is, you know, very much smaller than the number of people that would use those separated pathways. Having the separated pathways doesn't prohibit people from cycling on the roads anyway, although those people make arguments that the car drivers are less tolerant of them, and they also don't like the expense of building those pathways when they won't use them. I think it would be
Or even prohibit bikes so that there's a pedestrian refuge, if you will. That's basically what goes on in Holland and Denmark, and it's very successful.
Now, on the sidewalks, where are wheelchairs?
On the head, well, they can either one.
So they could
Any
be
of them.
either way. Okay.
Any of them. The question then gets into, you know, if you run into limitations on right-of-way or money, what do you give up? And so that would be the kind of debate. And also, and what I suggested in the paper is that on streets where there are excessive numbers of intersections and driveways, that it's probably better to give up the pedway and go to the bike lanes, because you have a lot of conflicts and it becomes a problem. Where you can, though, the preference should be to build a pedway instead of a bike lane. So it'd be more like a trail, and not like a big wide sidewalk trail.
I'll just say that the university has been working on this trail for about 5 years. It is happening now. Part of it, about half of it's built. The last part that leads all the way to the MKT trail, it starts from the heart of campus. It goes out kind of in the, up where Hearns is, and then it goes down the hill, out across those fields, then it goes under Providence. And that last part under Providence and onto the MKT trail is now being worked on. The bridge is being delivered any day now across Hinkson. We've been waiting for some time for that bridge. Yeah, the big bridge, the one that's going to go across the Hinkson. And so that's happening. The bulldozers are out there now, and they're going to do the other part of it. And those same bulldozers are going to do. We're not even going to apply for a MoDOT grant. We're just going to do the other part of it. to the city's part of the trail. So that connection will also go in the direction of Old 63. So you'll be able to go Old 63 all the way to the MKT trail, or from Hard Campus out in either of those directions. So it's happening.
Way before I ever even came to Missouri, so I can't give any better introduction than that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ian. I want to, first of all, congratulate Pednet. This is one hard-working group.
Yes.
And a very effective group. And I'll tell you what, the way you get things done is you go to work, you work tirelessly, you work doggedly, and this group is doing it. And congratulations to Pednet. No kidding. And it's just exactly what we need. It's pretty incredible what Pednet is doing. And, you know, to really get things done in the political arena, and that's what you're talking about to a large extent, is you've got to be out there pushing for it all the time. You're doing that very, very well. I heard lots of reasons why we ought to have Pednet, everything from global warming to other things, and I look at it from the point of view of a satisfactory life. I think that all of us want to have a good, satisfactory life. And one of the best ways to have a good, satisfactory life is to have some choices in that life. And when it comes to getting around, I think we ought to have some choices. And we ought to be able to choose to walk, we ought to be able to choose to drive, and we ought to be able to choose to bicycle. And the only way we can do that is to put in some infrastructure that allows us to do those things. Like, for example, tonight, after eating all those beans, I want to show
You are already gas propelled for the evening, darling.
walking or bicycling, nobody wants to be in a car. All right, now then. The beans were just delicious. We're getting some groups together, I think, both officially and unofficially, that will together kind of form that critical mass. I think it will help make things happen in Columbia. And we've got the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission, which is an official commission. It's got effective people on it, and it is looking at bicycle pedestrian issues. We recently got a letter that is suggesting we have a bicycle pedestrian coordinator hired by the city. I'm not sure that's realistic this time around, but nevertheless, I think the time will come, and relatively soon, if we can show that there is an adequate coalition demanding this sort of thing. We've got the Disabilities Commission. Christy Gulliver is the chair of that, and they're looking after the issues of people with disabilities, which, you know, it's really interesting. The issues of people who are walking and people who are bicycling and the people who have disabilities are exactly parallel. Just exactly parallel. What you do for one group benefits them all. And interestingly enough, that when you stop and think about it, when you do what these groups are demanding, it is also better for the automobile driver, believe it or not. And I can give you illustrations of that. And then we've got the Mayor's Council on Physical Fitness and Health. You heard Tom LaFontaine talking about the simple, we can dispute things like global warming if you want to. I believe in that it's here, but there are those who will argue about that, but nobody can dispute the health benefits of being able to walk and to bicycle. So let's think about those things. Well, the Pednet design is already happening in some places in Columbia. That wouldn't have happened without the Pednet. It just wouldn't happen. And I think that's great. But some of our new streets are going to, in fact, most of them, where it can be done, they're going to have the Pednet design in it. And we've got to be thinking about that. We've been pushing really hard for sidewalks. Columbia is doing a much, much better job in the sidewalks than it used to. And it's taken on some pretty tough issues in order to do that, including trying to get sidewalks along unimproved streets. I'm a great believer that one of the things that happens is a city spreads out where it was developed in the county, that so often there are no sidewalks that go along with it because they built without sidewalks out in the county. Well, we're insisting that you put sidewalks or money up, one or the other, where you have development along unimproved streets. Incidentally, the city is being sued over that right now. And so we'll see how that comes out. Crosswalks, you probably noticed that we put in a lot of crosswalks. They've just been added. They're much larger and much more conspicuous than in the past. We need to get people trained to realize they need to stop for the pedestrians in those crosswalks, but we're making progress. The trails, people have been talking about the trails. I think this extension with the University Trail is going to be a real plus to Columbia. Now, one of the things that I think is significant is that when that trail is put in, it's going to be possible to use that as a major commuter route. The MKT, you can get off the MKT and follow that and go right up to the university campus. It'd also be possible for those people living in that new apartment complex up on Old Highway 63 to get on that and ride into town. And so I hope that all of you, if you have any way of influencing people, will try and get those apartment owners to promote the use of bicycles on those trails to get in and out. Right now, trails are thought of pretty much as a parks and recreation thing. I believe that we need to start thinking in terms of that coming out of the street front much more than the parks and recreation. And that, but one of the things we need to do that is to get people to use these things for commuter. And so we have a real opportunity coming up when that gets connected to see to it that that happens. There are a couple of things that I would like for you all to consider. You're the kind of the steering committee of the Pednet. I've mentioned a couple of these to Chip. And one of them is the sidewalks. I personally believe that we should take over the maintenance of the sidewalks in the city. We do the streets and we do the power lines. We cut the trees down along the power lines. But we expect the people who live next to the sidewalks to maintain the sidewalks. Well, the simple fact is the sidewalks and eventually the Pednet features are going to be used by everybody in the community, and I don't see why they shouldn't be part of the street maintenance thing. But that's a pretty foreign idea right now. But I think it'd be great if we could somehow inventory our sidewalks and see what needs to be done. And I don't know whether that could be organized or not. But we've got lots of sidewalks that are 4 feet wide, which is a little too narrow, I think. But it's if they're really 4 feet wide, it's not too bad. But they've got grass that has come up over them. We've got low-hanging things. And if they're not pleasant to use, people don't use them. And we've got to get people out on it to the south. So that's one thing to take a look at. Another thing that I think we need to be looking at is hazards to bicycles. I know that there are lots of streets where until we get the Pednet system out, we've got to use the streets. And I know that there are some real hazards out there. There are grates that you can fall down into and all these things. We need to identify those so we can start pointing them out to Public Works and say, okay, we got to get these fixed. The last thing I'd like to mention is that in order to really make an impression, to get the political support that we really need, we got to get people out on their bicycles. We need to have a campaign where we get people out to ride their bicycles. It's fun. And a lot of people say it's hazardous to get out among the traffic. It's not all, really. But we need to get people out riding their bicycles. We need to think of a system that encourages it. This town's full of students, it's full of young people, it's full of people who would ride their bike if you're given proper encouragement. So that's something I think we need to do. Because if you get people out there on their bicycles all over the place, you'll get a lot more support. And we can't wait until the infrastructure is in place. I mean, it's one of the chicken and the egg things. If you wait until the infrastructure is in place, you're going to wait a long time because there won't be the support to get it in. So you got to get out there, take those risks, and that's my thought for the day.
Great.
Any questions? Because
So basically, you support this concept?
no, I think it's really, I mean, it's fantastic.
I should add that Darwin was one of the very first wave of Pednet.
So yeah, then